Las Vegas at night never truly sleeps. The neon lights flicker like restless stars, the constant hum of slot machines leaks through the walls of casinos, and the desert wind carries with it both promise and danger. Somewhere above that neon chaos, in a smoky hotel suite on the Strip, a man named Valentine Cross lit his last cigarette of the evening. Cross wasn't just another player in Vegas. Once a police detective, he had spent years studying the anatomy of crime, memorizing the weaknesses of banks, casinos, and the people who ran them. Now he lived on the other side of the law, where knowledge was currency and trust was always borrowed, never earned. The knock on the door came sharply, 3 short raps, like a code. Cross stubbed out the cigarette and opened the door. "Brown," he said flatly. Matthew Brown stepped inside, dressed in an immaculate suit, the kind only men with dangerous money wore. His smile was the kind that could buy friends, lovers, or bullets, depending on the occasion. "Valentine," Brown greeted, pouring himself a drink without asking. "I've got a proposal you can't refuse." Cross narrowed his eyes. "That's what everyone says before they try to get me killed." Brown chuckled, unbothered. "I'm talking about the job of a lifetime. The Fifth Avenue Bank, the one guarded by Arthur May's people." Cross leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment. Arthur May was not a name you dropped lightly. May wasn't just a banker, he was a crime lord wearing a tailored suit, a man who owned politicians, cops, and half the city's casinos. Robbing his bank was closer to suicide than a payday. "You're insane," Cross said finally. "That bank's a fortress." "Every fortress," Brown replied smoothly, "has a blind spot. And I know where it is. I can get you in, I can get you out, but I need your team." Cross exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers against the table. He could already hear the hum of gears turning in his mind, escape routes, security shifts, weak links in the chain. Dangerous, yes, but also tempting. "Who else knows?" Cross asked. "No one," Brown answered. "Not yet. But if you say yes tonight, we start tomorrow. This city has never seen a score like this." Cross studied him for a long moment, then lit another cigarette. The smoke curled between them like a contract being signed in silence. "All right, Brown," he said at last. "Let's dance with the devil." The following night, in the back room of a half-forgotten jazz bar on Fremont Street, Valentine Cross began to assemble his orchestra of outlaws. The air smelled of bourbon and dust, while the saxophone from the main hall cried out a melancholy tune, as if warning them all of what lay ahead. First to arrive was Lena. Slim, sharp-eyed, and restless, she carried her laptop like gunslingers once carried revolvers. No vault, no camera system, no encrypted network had ever kept her out. Cross trusted her fingers more than any firearm. "You always find trouble, Val," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "But this? Robbing May's bank? That's not trouble, that's suicide in high heels." Cross smirked. "And you've always had a taste for the impossible." Next came Document. Nobody knew his real name anymore. He was a wiry man with hands that trembled until they touched explosives. To him, C4 was just another brushstroke on canvas, and detonators were his instruments of music. He sat down heavily, ordering whiskey before speaking. "Tell me where to plant the fireworks, and I'll make the night sing," Doc muttered, voice gravelly from too many cigarettes and bad decisions. Then came Tommy, loud, reckless, all adrenaline wrapped in a leather jacket. He lived for roaring engines and burning rubber. Some called him crazy, but behind the wheel, he was untouchable. He leaned against the booth with a grin that could blind headlights. "So we're really doing this?" Tommy said. "Good. It's been a while since I drove like hell was chasing me." Cross let his eyes move across the table, watching each of them. These were not just criminals. They were his orchestra, each playing a different instrument, each necessary for the symphony he intended to conduct. And like any good conductor, he knew one mistake could ruin the entire performance. Finally, Brown arrived, fashionably late. His suit was spotless, his confidence unshaken. He slid into the booth as though he owned the place, carrying a small leather folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brown said, opening it, "the prize, the May Vault." Inside were blueprints, schedules, codes, enough to tempt even the most cautious mind. The vault lay buried beneath Fifth Avenue Bank, guarded not only by technology but by May's ruthless men. Cross studied the pages in silence, the way a general studies a battlefield map. His mind sharpened with every detail: guard rotations, blind spots in the surveillance, the timing of armored trucks. Every risk was written there in ink, and behind it, the promise of more money than any of them had ever seen. At last, he spoke. "We don't get a second chance. If one of you falls, we all fall. But if we succeed," he let the silence stretch, heavy with possibility, "we disappear as legends." The table went quiet. Outside, the saxophone wailed another note, long and sorrowful. "Legends, huh?" Tommy laughed, raising his glass. "Then let's make history." And so the deal was sealed, not with signatures or handshakes, but with the unspoken truth: none of them would ever be the same again. For 3 days, the team hid inside a rented warehouse on the edge of the city. From the outside it looked abandoned, a shell of rusted iron and peeling paint. But inside, beneath the pale glow of hanging lamps, it had become a war room. Maps covered the walls. Photographs of guards, sketches of ventilation shafts, and printed security codes were pinned in a precise order. Cross stood at the center like a chess master before a board, cigarette smoke curling around his sharp features. His voice was steady, deliberate. "Every move has a consequence," he told them. "We're not robbing a bank. We're robbing May himself. That means there's no such thing as small mistakes." Lena tapped on her laptop, projecting blueprints onto the wall. "The bank has 2 security layers, electronic and human. Electronic is mine. Cameras, sensors, encrypted door locks, I can blind them for 90 seconds at a time. But after that, systems reboot. 90 seconds, no more." "Plenty of time," Doc said with a grin, carefully assembling a miniature model of the bank out of scrap metal. He inserted tiny charges into weak spots like an artist adding strokes to a canvas. "If we need a door open, I'll open it. If we need a wall gone, it'll vanish. You tell me where the silence should break, Val, and I'll make it sing." Tommy leaned back in his chair, tossing car keys in the air. "You people forget the most important part: getting out. May's men patrol a 5-block radius around the bank. Their SUVs are faster than any police cruiser. But not faster than me. I'll have the Mustang waiting 2 streets over. If you reach me, you live. And if we don't?" Lena asked quietly. Tommy only smirked. "Then you die rich." Cross ignored the banter. His eyes traced the map again, lines of thought sparking behind his gaze. The plan had to be flawless. No alarms, no wasted seconds. In his mind, he already walked the corridors, timed every step, felt every lock click open beneath Lena's hands, heard the echo of Doc's controlled detonations. Finally, Brown spoke. He had been silent until now, watching them with that unsettling calm. "Arthur May's reach is longer than you think," he warned. "He has cops in his pocket, politicians on his payroll. If word leaks, we're finished before we start. I'll handle the outside pressure. You just get me into that vault." Cross looked at him for a long moment. There was something in Brown's tone, something too smooth, too confident, but he let it pass. "All right," Cross said at last. "We go in Friday night, during the city's biggest poker tournament. The strip will drown in noise, cameras will be distracted, and May's men will be spread thin guarding the high rollers. That's our window." The team exchanged glances. The decision was made. The room seemed to grow colder as if the walls themselves knew the weight of what had just been sealed. Cross stubbed out his cigarette and leaned forward, voice low and hard. From this moment on, we don't just plan a job. We plan survival. The red light pulsed like a heartbeat gone wild. What had been a vault room overflowing with neat stacks of cash had turned, in a breath, into a theatrical prison, money scattered on tables and the floor like confetti from a celebration that had ended in blood. Alarm tones wavered through the air, their thin, mechanical keening answering the frantic beats in everyone's chests. "We're screwed," Tommy muttered, voice low and raw, fingers white on a crowbar he'd never get to use. The tiny corridor outside hummed with distant shouts, boots, radios, and metallic echoes of a world converging on their location. Valentine Cross didn't allow panic. He moved like someone used to steering storms, calm, exacting. He looked to Lena first. "Can you cut the network? Buy us time." She worked like a woman possessed, fingers dancing across glass and plastic as if the machine obeyed the motion of her knuckles. Her face lit up in that pale, blue glow as she dove into code and countermeasures. "This isn't the bank's usual system," she breathed, not looking up. "Someone built an external override. She swallowed, "it's not me." Cross's mind slotted pieces together with the cold precision of a surgeon, a trap laid with surgical patience. He thought of Matthew Brown's smooth face and of the way the plan had been too convenient, too perfectly prepared. His eyes flicked to the doorway where Brown should have appeared to guide them out. He was not there. The timer on the main monitor blinked like an accusation, 2:20. Lena's mouth pressed into a thin line. 2 minutes, 20 seconds. If I can get into the subnet, I'll snag another 30, maybe 40 seconds. That's all. Doc swallowed a laugh that wasn't funny. He already had his hands on metal, on the delicate devices he preferred to call instruments. "Ventilation will do," he said simply. "We blow a hole up top and climb out through the shafts. It's messy, but it's a doorway." Cross measured the options with a glance that left no room for argument. "Do it." The charges were placed with surgical speed. Doc's fingers moved with a kind of affectionate cruelty toward explosives, there was a reverence in his touch. The ventilation grate shuddered and then obeyed physics and metal and human intent, it ripped away with a thundering cough, a ribbon of dust and cold air. A narrow chimney opened above them, hot, steamy, claustrophobic. "First up," Cross said, motioning Lena forward. She protested with a dry quip, "I'm not a cat," but she climbed, lithe and fierce. The others followed, one by one, until the shaft swallowed the last of them and they were a compact, muffled train of shadows. They moved through the guts of the bank, a maze of ducts and conduits smelling of dust and old secrets. Far below, the world grew louder, sirens mingling with the clamor of men who had been well fed on power and had no idea anyone could outmaneuver them. Their heads were down, their hands at ready, their eyes trained on procedure. That procedure would not have accounted for a shaft full of thieves. Cross was last. He paused with his shoulder against cold metal and thought, 90 seconds of blind cameras, the timed gate, the armored SUVs out front, everything that had seemed like leverage had been neutralized. Someone had known. Someone had expected them. The thought landed heavy in his gut. A distant mechanical click, subtle, precise, made him look up. Then, like a curtain falling, the service doors clanged shut at both ends. The room into which they were about to crawl was now ringed with red dots, laser sights painting thin, accusing lines across the metal. Voices, low, practiced, slid into the ventilation silence, "Hands where we can see them." They spilled out into the maintenance corridor like people waking into a nightmare. Men in black moved with the choreography of a trained ensemble, rifles leveled, boots whispering on concrete. At their head, cutting across the dim like a man cut from marble, stood Donovan May. He wore the kind of smile a man puts on when he's watched a play go exactly to script. "Valentine," he said, the name like a blade wrapped in silk. "You really thought you were the author of this evening? How flattering." Cross kept his jaw tight. "This is a setup," he said. His voice was flat, but underneath lay all the iron he'd ever needed. "You set us up." May's grin didn't waver. "I didn't set a trap, Valentine. I choreographed an ending that had to happen. You led your pieces onto the board. I simply cut the lights." Before Cross could reply, a new sound fractured the standoff, a deep, savage boom resonating somewhere beneath their feet. The corridor's lights stuttered and fell into a staccato. The world shivered. For a breathless second the men in black faltered, authority confronting the unexpected. Cross felt the embers of opportunity flare. "Now," he barked. Doc moved without ceremony, vaulting into motion, and the chaos that followed was a beast of improvisation. Men scattered, orders shouted, 100 small decisions becoming the difference between life and death. The planned exit no longer belonged to the architect of the trap. The game, briefly, slipped from May's hands. They were not out of the dark. They had only traded one shadow for another. But as they pushed into the night, lungs burning, Cross allowed himself one sharp, private thought: the board was no longer static. The players were shifting pieces, and the endgame had become something far more dangerous and far less predictable than any of them had bargained for. The city outside did not know the battle raging beneath its neon heart. The casinos still bled light onto the desert sky, tourists laughed too loudly in the streets, and dice clattered against felt tables. But in the alleys behind Fifth Avenue Bank, the night had turned feral. Cross and his team burst from a service hatch, lungs clawing for air thick with smoke and gunpowder. Tommy was first, dragging Lena out with the urgency of someone who had no patience left for subtlety. Doc scrambled after them, clutching the remainder of his charges in a small duffel, as though the world could collapse but his instruments must be saved. Cross emerged last, his shirt torn, face slick with sweat and dirt. He spun, pistol raised, eyes searching for shadows that did not belong. "Keep moving," he ordered. His voice was iron, but inside, his thoughts were blades cutting through chaos. The explosion that had rattled the bank hadn't been Doc's work. That meant another hand was writing this script. Someone else had entered the game. The alley yawned open into the glow of Fremont Street. Sirens wailed now, bleeding through the city's symphony of slot machines and drunken laughter. Black SUVs swarmed like predators on the prowl, Arthur May's men spilling out in waves. Cars 2 blocks down. Tommy shouted, already sprinting. His Mustang roared alive with a sound like thunder bottled and unleashed. They piled in, breathless, hearts thrumming. Tires screamed against asphalt as Tommy punched the gas, weaving through the narrow veins of downtown Vegas. The neon signs blurred, stretching like streaks of warped stars. Lena's hands trembled over her laptop. "They're tracking us," she muttered. "Not police, May's private network. It's too clean. Too fast. They've locked onto us like hawks." "Kill the signal," Cross snapped. "I'm trying," she fired back, sweat beading on her forehead. "But it's not just May. There's something else riding his system, something bigger." Doc barked a laugh, half mad. "Bigger? What's bigger than Arthur May?" No one answered. Bullets screamed against metal as one of the SUVs pulled alongside. A masked gunman leaned out, rifle gleaming under neon. Tommy swerved, clipping a fire hydrant. Water exploded skyward, a silver geyser drenching the streets. The Mustang fishtailed but straightened, engine howling in rebellion. Cross leaned out the window, firing 2 clean shots. The gunman toppled, mask slipping to reveal not a hardened gangster but a face too young, too pale, eyes vacant, as if he wasn't fully there. Cross's gut tightened. "That's not May's soldier," he muttered. Lena turned, face pale. "Then whose is he?" The Mustang ripped through the strip, leaving chaos in its wake. Yet for every SUV they lost in the labyrinth of Vegas lights, 2 more appeared, silent, efficient, unrelenting. Cross's mind burned. If May hadn't orchestrated this alone, then Brown's betrayal was not merely opportunistic. It was part of a larger design, something that had been moving pieces long before they stepped into that vault. As the car tore into the desert highway, leaving the city's glow behind, the team fell into a tense silence. Dust rose in their wake, stars burned cold above them. Cross lit a cigarette, his hand steady though his heart was not. "This isn't just about money anymore," he said. "We've stepped into someone else's war." The desert swallowed his words, leaving only the growl of the Mustang as it carried them deeper into shadows none of them yet understood. The city lights shrank behind them until they were no more than a faint orange glow trembling at the edge of the horizon. Ahead stretched the Mojave, vast, indifferent, silent. The Mustang devoured the highway, its engine a steady growl against the desert's endless hush. For the first hour, no one spoke. Each of them stared out into the dark, processing the chaos left behind. But silence can be as loud as gunfire, and eventually, it was Tommy who cracked. "We lost, he said, forcing bravado into his tone. "May's men don't follow this far out. We're ghosts now." Cross didn't answer immediately. He watched the rearview mirror, eyes narrowed, cigarette burning slow between his fingers. "We're not ghosts," he muttered. "We're prey that hasn't been caught yet." The Mustang pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that vanished into blackness. They drove until even the sound of traffic was gone. Finally, Tommy killed the engine. The silence that followed was cavernous, pressing down on them from all sides. They set up camp in the shadow of jagged rocks. Doc unpacked his duffel with ritual care, placing detonators beside water bottles as though the two were of equal necessity. Lena perched on a boulder, laptop glowing faintly, her face lit ghost pale in the screen's reflection. Cross circled the perimeter, every sense taut. The desert was never truly still, crickets clicked, the wind whispered, a coyote howled far off. Yet something in the air felt wrong, too heavy, too watchful. Lena broke the silence. "I pulled fragments from the trackers chasing us," she said softly. "The signals weren't just military grade. They were something else. Encrypted with layers I've never seen before. It felt like chasing smoke. Every time I thought I had them, the trail bent in on itself." Doc chuckled darkly. "Maybe May hired spooks. Black Ops types. Wouldn't be the first time the government and the mob shook hands under the table." Cross shook his head. "No. This was different. May wanted us alive long enough to play his theater piece. But those masked men," he paused, remembering the lifeless eyes of the gunmen he'd shot. "They weren't soldiers. They moved like machines, but they bled like men." Lena's voice trembled despite herself. "I replayed the footage. His pulse didn't spike even when he fired. It was flat, constant, like he wasn't afraid of dying." The desert wind hissed through the rocks, carrying sand across their faces. For a moment, it felt as if the world itself had drawn closer, listening. Tommy tried to laugh it off. "So what, we're up against zombies now." No one laughed with him. Cross crouched, rubbing grit between his fingers. He stared out into the horizon where the stars glimmered cold and unfeeling. Something out there was pulling strings, and he hated puppeteers he couldn't see. He finally spoke, low and certain, "May isn't our enemy anymore. He's just another pawn. Someone bigger is watching us. Testing us." The words hung in the dry night air, heavier than any gunshot. And in the silence that followed, far beyond the reach of their firelight, a shadow shifted against the rocks, too large, too deliberate to be an animal. The desert was listening, and it was not empty. Morning broke sharp and merciless over the Mojave. The desert has no patience for the fragile, sunlight beat down like a hammer, stripping away shadows, exposing everything. For Valentine Cross and his crew, that exposure felt like a death sentence. The Mustang sat half-hidden among rocks, its once glossy paint now dulled with dust. Doc brewed bitter coffee over a portable burner, muttering to himself as though caffeine might keep the demons at bay. Tommy paced, restless energy pouring out of him in nervous sparks. Lena's laptop hummed faintly, its glow nearly invisible against the blazing sun. Cross remained still, perched on a ledge overlooking the barren stretch of land. His cigarette burned slow, ash drifting into the wind. He was waiting, for the moment the world revealed what it had hidden. It came sooner than he expected. "Val," Lena called, voice unsteady. "You need to see this." He slid down the rock face, joining her in the shade. She angled the laptop toward him. On screen flickered distorted surveillance footage she had salvaged from the night before. At first it showed nothing but the chaos of their escape, smoke, gunfire, scrambling figures. But then the frame froze on a single still, one of the masked men stepping into view. The mask itself was nothing unusual, black fabric pulled tight over skin. But his eyes, God, the eyes, were wrong. Too pale, too reflective, as though the iris was silver glass. And his movements, when slowed frame by frame, betrayed something inhumanly precise. Each step landed at the exact same angle, every gesture economical, like choreography drilled beyond the limits of flesh. "That's not adrenaline," Lena whispered. "That's programming." Doc leaned closer, squinting at the grainy image. "What the hell are we looking at? Some kind of military tech?" Cross didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened. He had seen killers in every form, desperate junkies, trained soldiers, cold-eyed professionals. But this? This was different. This was something designed. Before he could speak, Tommy shouted from the edge of camp. "We've got company." Dust plumes rose in the distance, shimmering in the heat. Not cars, not SUVs, too small, too steady. As they drew closer, Cross realized what they were, drones. Sleek, black, humming like a swarm of mechanical wasps. "Move!" Cross barked. The first drone swooped low, a sharp hiss cutting the air. Bullets sprayed the rocks, kicking up shards of stone. Doc dropped his coffee and yanked a charge from his bag. "Back away," he roared, hurling the explosive into the open. The desert shuddered with the blast, one drone disintegrating midair. But the swarm didn't break. 3 more split off, circling like predators testing their prey. Tommy scrambled for the Mustang, keys jangling. "We can't stay here." Cross fired at the nearest machine, but its metal shell deflected the bullet with a mocking ping. He spat a curse and reloaded. Lena slammed her laptop shut, slinging it under her arm. "These aren't May's toys," she said, breath ragged. "This is bigger, military, corporate, I don't know. But whoever's behind it, they know exactly where we are." The drones regrouped, hovering just beyond range, cameras glinting in the brutal sun. Watching. Recording. Waiting. Cross lowered his gun, chest rising and falling. They weren't meant to die here, not yet. This was a message, clear as day, "We see you. We own the board, *." And for the first time since the heist began, Valentine Cross felt the edges of control slip through his fingers. The Mustang tore across the desert highway, its engine screaming against the vast silence. The sun baked the asphalt into a shimmering mirage, and every mile felt like a desperate wager against time. Behind them, the drones did not follow, they had already done their work, broadcasting the message that the team was no longer invisible. Inside the car, no one spoke. Lena clutched her laptop like it was the only weapon that mattered. Doc sat rigid, one hand wrapped around the strap of his duffel as if the explosives inside might comfort him. Tommy gripped the wheel tighter than a gambler clings to his last chip, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Cross lit another cigarette. Smoke curled into the hot air, and he broke the silence at last. "We can't run forever. Whoever's pulling the strings, they'll find us again. We need leverage. Information." Lena turned to him, face pale. And where exactly do you expect to find that? These people erased their footprints before I even touched them. They're ghosts with satellites. Cross stared out the window, jaw tight. Every ghost has a shadow. As if on cue, a sudden burst of static crackled through the car's radio. Tommy swore, slapping the dial, but the noise resolved into a voice. Cross, it said. Calm. Distorted, but unmistakably directed at him. If you want answers, follow the beacon. Everyone froze. The voice cut out, replaced by coordinates blinking faintly across Lena's laptop. Doc's eyes narrowed. That's a trap. Of course it's a trap, Cross replied, flicking ash out the window. But sometimes you walk into the trap to find out who's holding the rope. Hours later, the Mustang rolled to a stop at an abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere. The building sagged like a skeleton of wood and rust, its windows shattered, pumps long dry. Perfect, Tommy muttered. Classic horror movie setup. But as they approached, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Not May, not Brown, someone else. A woman, tall and lean, dressed in desert fatigues that had seen too many battles. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind of eyes that had looked through scopes and across borders most people would never know existed. Cross, she said, lowering her hood. You don't know me, but I know you. Name's Agent Keller. The word agent hit the crew like a bullet. Guns rose instinctively, Doc's pistol, Tommy's knife, even Lena's trembling hand wrapped around a small revolver. Keller didn't flinch. She raised her hands slowly. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be ash. I'm here because we share an enemy. Cross stepped forward, unshaken, though his mind raced. And who would that be? Keller's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. The same people who sent those drones. You've stumbled into something bigger than May's empire. A project buried so deep it doesn't officially exist. Lena lowered her gun, just slightly. What project? Keller's eyes hardened. They call it Spectre, and if you don't listen carefully, you won't live long enough to understand what it really means. The desert wind moaned through the ruined station, carrying dust and dread in equal measure. For the first time since the vault, the crew realized the game they were in had rules written by someone else entirely. And Valentine Cross, who had always thought himself the conductor of chaos, understood he was now only a player on someone else's board. The abandoned gas station became a war room, its dust-covered counters now serving as a table for secrets. The desert air pressed hot against the broken windows, carrying the scent of rust and old gasoline. Cross and his crew formed a wary semicircle around Agent Keller, each of them balancing suspicion with the fragile thread of curiosity. Keller dropped a weathered folder onto the counter. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance stills, schematics, faces half-blurred in motion. She tapped the first image, the silver-eyed soldier Cross had killed outside the bank. Spectre, Keller said. The word lingered in the air like smoke. A classified program designed to manufacture soldiers who don't question orders, don't panic, and don't hesitate. Half machine, half man. Disposable. Replaceable. Perfect for dirty wars no government wants to admit to. Doc whistled low. So we're up against cyborgs now. They're not machines, Keller corrected, eyes sharp. They're men, broken down, rebuilt, conditioned. Their humanity stripped to the bone. You shoot them, they bleed. But they don't fear. They don't doubt. And they don't stop until they're told. Lena leaned closer, scanning the files. Her voice was thin, almost childlike. You're saying they've been programmed? Keller nodded once. Spectre was supposed to stay buried. But May made a deal. He wanted protection for his empire, something stronger than hired guns. He traded money and influence for soldiers that don't sleep, don't betray, don't need loyalty. What you walked into at the bank wasn't just a heist. It was a field test. Cross's cigarette burned to ash between his fingers. He didn't move. And Brown? He asked quietly. Keller's expression darkened. Brown isn't working for May. He's working for the ones who control Spectre. May was just a client. You were the bait. The room went still. Doc's jaw clenched, Tommy swore under his breath, Lena shut her laptop as if closing it could erase the truth. Cross finally exhaled smoke, eyes narrowing. So we stole from May, but the money doesn't matter. The real prize was us, our choices, our patterns, our limits. Keller's silence was answer enough. Tommy slammed a fist against the counter. So what now? They know where we are, they've got an army of mind-wiped killers, and we're just supposed to roll over. Keller leaned in, her voice low, urgent. No. You do what you do best, you hit back. Spectre's facility isn't far from here. You burn it, you cripple their program. You survive long enough to vanish. Lena's eyes widened. You want us to attack them? We barely survived one night in Vegas. You don't have a choice, Keller said. If you run, they'll hunt you until you're nothing but shadows in the desert. If you fight, at least you die on your own terms. Cross crushed the cigarette beneath his boot. His voice, when it came, was steel wrapped in gravel. Then we don't just fight. We end this. Outside, the desert sun bled red into the horizon, as if the land itself knew a storm was gathering. And for the first time, Cross's crew wasn't just planning a heist. They were planning a war. The desert facility loomed out of the sand like a scar, steel fences, satellite dishes angled skyward, the dull hum of power generators filling the air. There were no signs, no flags, nothing to suggest ownership. Just walls meant to keep secrets in and trespassers out. Cross and his crew crouched in the shadow of jagged rocks, the Mustang hidden beneath a camouflaged tarp. The night pressed close, heavy with the smell of dust and fuel. Agent Keller pointed toward the complex, her face hard with resolve. Inside, she whispered, is Spectre's command hub. Take it down, and they lose control. Burn the servers, and you disappear. Doc pulled a charge from his bag, running his hand along the detonator like a priest blessing holy scripture. I'll make sure the servers sing their last note. Lena tapped on her laptop, the screen casting her face in pale light. Give me 3 minutes inside their system, and I can fry it from the inside. But someone has to keep them off me. That's my department, Tommy said with a grin too sharp to be sane. He tightened his grip on the Mustang's keys like they were a weapon. You give me roads, I'll give you time. Cross listened, memorizing every word. But something gnawed at him, a memory of Brown's smile, of the trap in the bank. He had learned to trust his instincts, and now those instincts screamed. Doc pulled a charge from his bag, running his hand along the detonator like a priest blessing holy scripture. I'll make sure the servers sing their last note. Still, he gave the order. We move. The infiltration was fast, brutal. Doc's charges ripped open a side gate. Tommy drove through the breach like a thunderclap, headlights cutting the night. Lena slipped inside the control room, fingers flying over keys, while Doc wired explosives along server racks. For a moment, it worked. The facility trembled under their assault, alarms wailing, soldiers scattering. Cross covered their advance with clean, lethal precision. And then, he saw him. Brown. Standing in the heart of the chaos, untouched, calm. His suit immaculate, his smile unchanged. You finally made it, Valentine, Brown said, voice carrying even over the roar of fire and gunfire. Exactly where I wanted you. Cross raised his gun. You sold us out. To May. To Spectre. To whoever's paying. Brown shook his head slowly. You still don't see it, do you? You were never the thief. You were the experiment. Lena froze at her terminal. Val, he's inside the system. He's not here to stop me. He's part of it. The servers flared, screens filling with data, footage of their heist, their escape, every choice they'd made. Brown's voice echoed through the room, through the machines, through the very walls. Spectre isn't about soldiers, he said. It's about predictability. About proving that even chaos can be mapped, controlled. You weren't running from us. You were running for us. Every decision you made fed the model. Cross's stomach turned cold. The explosions, the ambushes, the drones, it hadn't been war. It had been theater. A simulation written in flesh and blood. Val, Lena whispered, eyes wide with terror, we're the program. Brown's form flickered on the monitors, his smile larger now, more cruel. And congratulations, he said. You've passed every test. Doc's hand hovered over the detonator. His voice was hoarse. Say the word, boss. We can still bury this place. Cross stared at the screens, at the truth that had finally revealed itself. The desert wind rattled the broken windows, carrying the smell of smoke and endings. He gave a single nod. The night erupted in fire. When the dust cleared, nothing remained of the Spectre facility but twisted steel and scorched earth. No proof, no survivors, only ash. The Mustang reappeared on the horizon hours later, battered but alive. Inside, the crew sat in silence, each of them hollowed by what they had learned. Cross lit one last cigarette, staring at the endless desert road ahead. We thought we were thieves, he murmured. Turns out we were something else entirely. Lena turned to him, voice breaking. So what are we now? Cross exhaled smoke, eyes on the horizon. Ghosts, he said. And ghosts don't die, they haunt. The Mustang disappeared into the dawn, leaving nothing but tire tracks fading into sand.